for 15 minutes, and then another guy comes out and interrupts them and makes a challenge, and that's the main event for that night. Shouldn't these don't you think a title match would be planned in advance? Like, if we're to believe that professional wrestling is real, which is what the goal is we're trying to convince the audience that what's going on out there is real. You don't show up to Yankee Stadium. Gee, I wonder who the Yankees are playing tonight. You know who they're playing. You know who's pitching. And they put the starting lineups on the board as the fans are walking into the stadium. Now look at professional wrestling. When on Raw do they advertise what's coming up that night? It's as the show is going on. It's completely unrealistic. You need to list the card. If you did that in professional wrestling, yeah, we're going to have a wrestling show tonight, but we don't know who's wrestling and we don't know who's on the card. Who's going to go?
Yeah, it's funny. They do all these segments that make up the card as the show goes. They're really not that interesting to watch. The process of matchmaking is not exactly entertaining.
Correct. It's not. It should be. When was the last time you put on a UFC pay-per-view and they just made up the card as they went along? They have the Ultimate Fighter show that builds up young trainees, and they have one veteran mixed martial arts fighter coach one group of rookies. And then you have another one coach the other set of rookies. The rookies fight each week. They announce the week before who's going to fight the next week. Then after the 3 months, the two head coaches from each UFC team, the veterans, will fight on that upcoming pay-per-view. UFC, there's a build-up, there's a reason, there's tension built up for 2-3 months on this program to get you emotionally involved, to want to order that pay-per-view to see the fight. When you put on Raw, sometimes you don't know what the main event is until 9:45, 10 o'clock. And the wrestlers just go out and make up the matches themselves. I mean, are the New York Jets football team this Sunday just going to drive to a random stadium at 4 o'clock? Let's go to Oakland, and today we'll challenge the Raiders. And then in 10 minutes, after the Raiders accept our challenge, we're going to get dressed and put our shoulder pads on. And
No. What happens is, Kevin, what happens is that football teams show up, and they wait for John Lovitz to come to midfield and tell him who's going to play who.
Right, yeah, that's another thing, too. Yeah, is John Lovitz going to take Rex Ryan's? You know what? This week, the New York Jets football team is going to have a guest host coach their team. Wrestling is so not believable, and everything they do insults the intelligence of the viewer, which is why 10 million professional wrestling fans from 10 years ago are no longer watching. Where did they go? They went somewhere. They're still alive. They're watching UFC. They're not watching wrestling. But people in the wrestling world claim that UFC is not competition. You know what? I watch more UFC now than professional wrestling, and I used to be a professional wrestling fan, and I don't watch professional wrestling the way it's presented today on TV. I'm watching the UFC. They lost me. They lost a lot of people, in that age 18 to 54-year-old demographic, and that's a demographic that goes out and spends money, and that's a demographic that advertisers want. Look at the name brand sponsors on the UFC canvas during their fights.
They got Budweiser, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go. What name brand sponsors are on the WWE mat? None.
They argue, by the way, this is the strangest thing, and this is true. A lot of the cruiserweights that were in WCW, back when WCW used to have the match that had the emblems on them and things like that, like the big Nitro symbol in the middle of the ring, the cruiserweights used to say, well, when I jump off the top rope, that emblem makes me trip.
Then don't
What's
jump
it made
off
of?
the top rope. It did look like a big, shiny, vinyl sticker, which isn't a good idea because when there's sweat on the mat, that vinyl decal might get slippery. The UFC, it looks like they're silk screened on. So they're,
yeah, they need to do.
Yeah,
that probably should be what they do. Yeah,
but they do it right. That's why the UFC's been around, since 1993, and WCW has been out of business for the past 9 years.
There you go. Yep. All righty, Kevin. Well, campiwf.com. You're on Facebook as well. Where else can people find more information on the IWF?
You can go to our Facebook or MySpace or Twitter or all that social page nonsense. Just type in Wrestling IWF, and we will come up. You can check us out on YouTube as well, and follow us, and come and watch one of our live events. See professional wrestling presented the way it should be. Good against evil. Guys fighting over championships. Hey, there's a novel idea. Maybe they should try that on Raw or SmackDown someday. But you know what? Let's just hope that professional wrestling, before it's too late, gets back to presenting it in a style where it comes off as somewhat believable to the audience, so we could all, once again, one day, become fans. One more time.